Om Mahyanati Timandasya Chinanjana Shanakya Sakshan Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svamabhagadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeyam Shio Shiyuda Padakamanam Shigam Vaishnavamsha Shiyopam Jagajatam Sakanaragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaduttam Parjanasaitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Saganavita Shivashakam Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jatpate Gopesha Kapkakanta Radhakanta Namastate Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhana Sutadevi Pranamama Haripriye Pankha Kalpa Vishake Pasan Vivisha Patnam Pavanabhyo Vaishnabhyo Namo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jai Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskatyani Dasatani Srila Prabhupada Ki. Today we will discuss chapter 25 of Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam, the glories of devotional service. Today we will hear for the first time the Sankhya philosophy. So, first an overview of chapter 25. So, first we have 3 verses in which Saunaka Rishi, on behalf of the sages of Namisaranya, he requests Sutta Goswami to speak about Kapila Muni. And then to continue, the conversation resumes between Maitreya Muni and Mahatma Vidura. And Maitreya tells about devotee requesting Kapila to get her out of ignorance and to remove her false ego. Then from verses 12 till 19, Kapila Muni explains the basics of Sankhya philosophy. And of course the need for purifying the consciousness from our impurities of lust, to move from the conditioned to the liberated to the liberated position. And after that he explains how the importance of becoming attached to hearing from a sadhu about Krishna. And then devotee requests to explain the yoga system in a way she can understand it and feel transcendental happiness. And in the last part, Kapila explains how devotional service finishes or dissolves the subtle body. We may remember it in 2.10.6, liberation is described as the annihilation of the subtle body. So how to dissolve the subtle body. And then it stresses the importance of meditating and becoming absorbed in the transcendental form of the Lord. And then he will explain benefits of devotional service. So that's an overview of the entire chapter. Today we will discuss verse 1 to 14. More logically, I would say from 1 to 19, but it's planned like that, 1 to 14. But before going into this chapter, I have here a list of points which are discussed in this chapter. So in the first 12 verses, we will find instructions relevant for making spiritual advancement. So, especially in this part of the discussion of this chapter, I would like you to, when we go to the verses, think about it. Which instructions here are really relevant for me for making spiritual advancement, and take note of that. And then at the end, in the second part, we can discuss that. And then, of course, the results of being entangled with Maya and the process of becoming free from Maya will be discussed. Because that's the purpose of Sankhya Yoga we understood from the previous chapter, is to free one from the entanglement of becoming attached to fruitive activities, thus being entangled, and how to become free from it. And then the goal of Sankhya will be more detailed described, and the principles that breaks material attachment and award success. So you have this attachment to the sadhu, hearing from him, from Krishna, that breaks the material attachment, that purifies the heart. So, and then there will be, the relationship will be explained of varieties of forms of liberation to bhakti, and we will find in this chapter that the devotee factually is not interested in liberation, but he would accept a personal form if offered, but is not interested in liberation. Then the principles of deity worship are discussed, and that's very interesting in this chapter. The purpose of deity worship is discussed, and that may be a little different than we usually accept, but the real purpose is described here, we will see. And the relationship between deity worship and liberation, and how a devotee thinks towards next life. So all very important subject matters we will discuss in this chapter. So we have given you a summary, and now a summary of the points that are really relevant to us. So now we will go in the chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we have in the first 3 verses, Shaunaka Rishi is speaking. So we have these different levels always. Shaunaka Rishi is asking questions to Sutta Goswami, and then Sutta Goswami tells about Maitreya, discussing with Vidura that, of course, this discussion between Maitreya and Vidura comes from the discussion from Sukadev Goswami, and Maharaj breaks it. So it's just a repetition of that. So you have these different levels always. You go from one level to another sometimes. Yes. Because Maitreya Muni, factually Maitreya Muni is a good friend of Srila Vyasadeva. He was formerly an impersonalist, but then we will hear in the 11th canto, at the end of the 10th also, how in the 11th canto how Krishna instructed Uddhav before leaving for the spiritual world, and Maitreya Muni was also there. And Maitreya Muni is elderly. So we heard that in the beginning of this canto, because Uddhav did not want to instruct Uddhav, although he was seemingly more advanced than Maitreya. He said, no, that it's an offense that I instruct you, because Maitreya Muni was also there. He was also there when Krishna instructed him, and when Krishna instructed us, and Maitreya Muni is elderly, so that's the etiquette. He's also qualified to instruct you. So now the first three texts, Saunaka speaking, he is asking the questions on behalf of the sages of Namisaranya, because it's important that the discussion is going on, and by discussions, then the discussion is going further, that Saunaka is the head of all these sages of Namisaranya, and he asks questions on their behalf. So it is Saunaka Uvacha Kapilas Tava Sankyata Bhagavanat Mamaya Yata Svayamaja Saksat Atma Prahyaptaye Vrinam. So can someone read the translation, please?
Sri Saunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni. By his internal potency, he descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of whole human race. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So, Srila Prabhupada in the purpose refers to Atma Prahnaptaye. He says that this indicates that the Lord descends for the benefit of the human race to give transcendental knowledge. That yes, Atma Prahyaptaye. It's translated by Srila Prabhupada in a word-for-word translation, to disseminate transcendental knowledge. So Vedic knowledge offers a program for good living conditions and gradual elevation to the platform of goodness. Srila Prabhupada makes the point, in the mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. So that's also in Bhagavad Gita 14:11. Sarvatvareshu desmim prakasha upajayate jnanam yata tata vidya vividam sattvam ityuta. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. In the mode of goodness, Srila Prabhupada says, one can see things in the right position, one can hear things in the right position. There are symptoms of happiness. That's the mode of goodness. So one can see, when one is situated in the mode of goodness, is able to understand knowledge of the self, that I'm not his body. One can understand knowledge of the self, transcendental knowledge. But of course, there is a difference between Jnana and Vijnana, between understanding and realizing. So realizing comes by the practice of devotional service, and Krishna gives the realization to the heart. Therefore we need Mamsya Vyabhacharana Bhakti Uruna Sevati Sagadan Samatichidam Brahmaboya Kalpati. One needs to transcend the modes to get its realization. But in the mode of passion there is no knowledge, Srila Prabhupada said. Nothing. No real knowledge. And on the platform of ignorance, tamas, no knowledge and also no enjoyment. That it's life just like the animals. So Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. Therefore we have the Varnashram system is meant to bring everyone to the platform of goodness. And goodness is the platform where we can start to understand something about spiritual life. Therefore, we should always follow the Brahminical standards in goodness as much as possible. Then we can understand knowledge of the self. But of course, that knowledge, Srila Prabhupada said, has to be received in the disciplic succession. Transcendental knowledge comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is transmitted through his bona fide devotee. So Saunaka Muni states here, Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took birth to appreciate and disseminate transcendental knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada makes his point, just understanding Aham Brahmasmi, I'm not this body, I'm Brahman, that's not sufficient for self-realization. Self-realization means understanding who we are, not just that we are Brahman, we are a servant of Krishna. And the spirit soul has activities. So in Brahman there are activities and activities of the soul. Activity of the soul is to serve Parabrahman, Krishna. So one must be situated in the activities of Brahman. So there is activity, which is called devotional service. So the knowledge of those activities is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead here himself. Human life is meant for regulated life, not animal life. Only in regulated life we can understand transcendental knowledge. So now Saunaka Rishi is continuing. Text 2. Nayasya vasmana pumsam parimna svarga yoginam Vishruta devasya puritripyanti me sava. Saunaka continued, there is no one who knows more than the Lord himself. No one is more worshipable or more mature, a yogi, than he. He is therefore the master of the Vedas. And to hear about him is always the actual pleasure of the senses. He speaks about the actual pleasure of the senses. So of course that there is no one who knows more than the Lord himself. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 7.7, Mata parataram natyat kintinashta dhananjya maisarvamidam protam Sutremanagana. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. And Vedas confirm eka baunam yo vidadati kamam from the Katha Upanishads 2:13. That yes, the Lord expanded himself in many for enjoyment. Interesting. So all living entities, both Vishnu Tattva, Jiva Tattva, they are all subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada makes, he is the highest. Nayasya Vasmana Pumsam. That's from the verse here, the first line. Amongst the living entities, no one can surpass the Supreme Person. No one is richer, more famous, stronger, more beautiful, or more renounced than he. Anyone who is associated with the Lord is a first-class yogi. By constant association with the Lord, they become as good as the Lord himself. Varumna means the most worshipful of yogis. To hear from Krishna is the real pleasure of the senses. Govinda, he who enlivens the senses. So life is meant for enjoyment, but what is that transcendental enjoyment? It's not meant for enjoyment of the temporary body. But for this, Narada Muni says that that we have to give up our upadis, that sarva upadi, we have to give all upadis and serve the senses of the Supreme Lord. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam tat paraparatva nirmalam rishikesha rishikena Shivanam Bhakti Uchate. That's the verse. That's called devotional service, pleasing the transcendental senses of the Lord. And that gives immense pleasure, ecstasy to the spirit soul. And that's our real enjoyment. But we are not able to experience that now because the senses are covered over by this upadis that so all his instructions, being absolute, are non-different from him. That the more one reads Bhagavad Gita, the more one gets an appetite to read and understand it. So that's important. Srila Prabhupada advised everyone has to read his books every day. Otherwise, why am I writing these books? Srila Prabhupada said. I'm writing them for you. You should read them. Otherwise, go avakya. Then you commit offense to the spiritual master if you do not read him. These are the words of Prabhupada. So he wrote these books for us. And the more one reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, one gets appetite to understand and to read and understand it. The more we hear and chant the glories of the Lord, the more we become happy. Now, text 3 is the last text of spoken by Sanaka Rishi. Last text 3. Yat vidate Bhagavan svachantat mamaya tanimesha dadanasya kirtanyan yanukirtaya. Therefore, please precisely describe all the activities and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is full of self-desire and who assumes all these activities by his internal potency. So So he wants to hear about activities of the Supreme Personality of God. That's the interest of the sage of Namaskar. They are coming to hear about Krishna, and they don't want to hear about other things. It must be related to Krishna, and that has been stressed before. Before Sankarisha has expressed similar sentiments. Tell us about Krishna, that not about other things. That's not our interest. So please therefore describe all the activities and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of God, who is full of self-desire and who assumes all these activities by his eternal potency. So the word anukirtaya, to follow the description, that's important. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport. Can someone read this short purport which is on the screen now?
Yes, Prabhuji. The word Anukirtaya is very significant. Anukirtaya means to follow the description, not to create a concocted mental description, but to follow. Sonaka Rishi requested Suta Goswami to describe what he had actually heard from his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, about the transcendental pastimes of the Lord manifested by his internal energy. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no material body, but he can assume any kind of body by his supreme will. That is made possible by his internal energy.
Thank you. Now we are going back to Maitreya. Maitreya is speaking. Sutta vacha dvaipajana sakastvenam Maitreya bhagavam stata pahedam viduram prita amviksikshyam prajotita. Can someone read the translation, please?
Sri Sutta Goswami said, the most powerful sage Maitreya was a friend of Vyasadeva. Being encouraged and pleased by Vidura's inquiry about transcendental knowledge, Maitreya spoke as follows.
So interesting, Srila Prabhupada makes that point in the purport, that Maitreya is addressed here as Bhagavan. And why? Because he was spiritually far advanced, a personal friend of Dvaipajana Vyas. So when Srila Prabhupada said, when there are discourses on transcendental topics between devotees of equal mentality, the questions and answers are very fruitful and encouraging. That's interesting. Of equal mentality. That text 5. Maitreya vacha pitari prastite ranjam mata prayasikirsaya tasmin bindu sare vatsit paravan kapila kila. Someone can read the translation, please.
Maitreya said, when Kardama left for the forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovara to please his mother Devahuti.
Srila Prabhupada makes the point very strong again in the purport. One should not remain continually implicated in household affairs up to the time of death. He must leave. Family affairs and the wife must be taken care of by grown son. 6. Tammashinam akarmanam tattva margara darshanam svasutam devahutyaha. Dhatu samsmarati vacham. Translation, please. Someone can read.
When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words Brahma had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows.
Okay, she understood. This is the moment now I will ask my questions that which she shared before with Kardama Muni. So yes, we will hear now devotees' concern. What's our problem? Devotir uvacha Nirvinanintarambo mam asatindriya takshanat yena sambayamanena papanandam tama prabho. Can someone read the translation, please?
Devahuti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance.
So, Bhaktinanita, can you read also the purport, please?
Yes, Prabhu. Here the word asat indriya, darsanath, is significant. Asat means impermanent, temporary, and indriya means senses. Thus, asat indriya darshanath means from being agitated by the temporarily manifest senses of the material body. We are evolving through different status of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body. And therefore, the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary or asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses being contaminated by matter are not acting properly. Devotional service therefore involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed Krishna consciousness, we have reached Sad Indriya, or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service, whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental message from a person like Kapila. Devahuti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing the instructions of Lord Kapila. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So, anything which changes in this world is called asat. So everything changes in this world. Our relations change, everything it changes. It's asat. It's temporary. And what's the problem? The problem is like the Yaksha who asked Yudhishthira Maharaj, what's the most amazing thing in this world? And then Yudhishthira Maharaj said, the most amazing thing is that people experience that everything is temporary in this world, but still they try to settle down here permanently. That's the most amazing thing. But Srila Prabhupada said, we have our permanent senses. Like it says, we have this arm, so it says, under this hand, there is a subtle hand, a subtle body, because the gross hand is grown upon the subtle. And under the subtle body, you have the spiritual hand, the spiritual senses. They are now covered over that. So we have our permanent spiritual senses, but we can not use it. now in this world, unless we engage in devotional service. Then they will become uncovered gradually, because now they are covered by the material body. So devotional service involves freeing the senses from the contamination of matter, especially from the subtle body, because the next gross body will grow on the subtle body. A subtle body is there when it's contaminated with material desires. Our business is, and that's also the purpose of this Sankhya, to get liberation. We must get rid of this subtle body. And how do we do that? By spiritualizing the subtle body. Subtle body has three parts: the mind, intelligence, false ego. How do we spiritualize the mind? Manmano, by thinking of Krishna. And how do we spiritualize the intelligence? By hearing transcendental knowledge and by using our intelligence to make plans to serve Krishna. So in that way we are spiritualizing gradually the mind and the intelligence. And if the mind and intelligence is completely spiritualized, then there is no false ego anymore. But the false ego comes from the false idea that I am this body, which is seated in the mind and the intelligence, but then that's gone. So when the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed devotional service, we have reached Sat Indriya, our eternal sensory activities, the real senses and the real sensory activities. And that because the subtle body, the spiritual body, you can only use in the service of Krishna. That's what it's meant for. You cannot use it for material things, for material activities. No, therefore Krishna is given us, because we wanted that, he gave us a subtle and gross body to do that. But eternal sensory activities, how do we call that? Devotional service. That's devotional service. That then temporary sensory activities is sense gratification. So unless one becomes tired of this sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Apiladev. We must be tired, wanting to give it up. I've suffered so much birth after birth by this attachment of these senses to this sense object, and I don't want it anymore. I'm disgusted. And that is what devotee is expressing. She's a good candidate to become liberated, therefore, because she will eagerly hear this transcendental knowledge to solve that problem. So, text 8. She continues. Tasyam tvam tamasun yasya duspara satya paragam satchakshur janmanam ante labdhamet vat anugraha. Someone can read the translation, please. Only the translation.
Rajaldev,
Thank
your
you.
lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental eye, which, by your mercy only, I have attained after many, many births. Thank you.
Yeah. So this verse indicates the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. So the spiritual master is the transcendental I. You are my transcendental I, she says, and by your mercy only, that I've attained after many births, this transcendental I. So the spiritual master is worshipped as one who delivers the disciple from the mire with the torch of knowledge. So paragam refers to one who takes the disciple to the other side. This side is a conditioned life, and the other side is a side of freedom. So the spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. So after many births, one is able to find a bona fide spiritual master and surrender unto him. One can be taken to the side of light. So that's the point at rest. Yeah, that's Mother Devotee is expressing, and she continues in text 9. That Ya adyo bhagavam pumsam ishvaro vaibhavam kila lokasya tamasandasya Shaksu Surya Ivodita. Can someone read the translation in the purport, please? Short purport.
You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. Kapila Muni is accepted as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Here the word Adya means the origin of all living entities, and Pumsam Ishvara means the Lord Ishvara of the living entities, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Kapila Muni is the direct expansion of Krishna, who is the sun of spiritual knowledge. As the sun dissipates the darkness of the universe, so when the light of the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down, it at once dissipates the darkness of Maya. We have our eyes, but without the light of the sun, our eyes are of no value. Similarly, without the light of the Supreme Lord or without the divine grace of the spiritual master, one cannot see things as they are.
Thank you. Now, in the next verse, Devayuti will speak about Maya. Maya, and so we will hear what Maya factually means. That verse 10. Attame devasamohan apakastum tvanarasi yo vachaoham mameti etashmin yoitastvaya. Can someone read just the translation, please? Only translation.
Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations.
Right. So, the false ego means identifying the body as oneself and claiming things in relation to the body as mine. And that is called Maya. So can someone read the first paragraph here? Srila Prabhupada explaining this very expertly in this book. First paragraph only.
The false hope of identifying one's body as one's self and of claiming things possessed in relationship with the body is called Maya. In Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness. Devpati has stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for possessions in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord. But that is not the actual fact. As soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants instead to enjoy himself by sense gratification, he is captured by Maya. This capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and attachment for the possessions of the body. These are the activities of Maya, and since Maya is also an agent of the Lord, it is indirectly the action of the Lord. The Lord is merciful. If anyone wants to forget Him and enjoy this material world, He gives him full facility, not directly, but through the agency of His material potency. Therefore, since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget Him. Devhuti therefore said, "My engagement in sense gratification was also due to you. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement." Hare Krishna.
So Maya is capturing us by our desire to enjoy. And we heard about that in the second canto already. That Brahma, before starting his Visarga, he created the material atmosphere. And the first is tamas. We want to enjoy. And Krishna says, you want to enjoy? Yes. There's one problem. I'm the enjoyer. But okay, you want it. Are you sure? And we say, yes, we want to experience, to be the enjoyer. Okay, but then you have to forget me. So that's the first point that happens. Tamas, we forget Krishna. And then the next thing that happens is moha. I think myself the enjoyer. I want to enjoy everything. And then the next step in the illusion is mamoya. This must be mine for my enjoyment. And then the next step in the illusion is you suffer. Suffering comes because of the attachment. It doesn't work out. And that's Tamishra, this suffering hell. And then on that Tamishra, the greatest hell is, I'm thinking I'm going to die. The soul is eternal, we don't die. So these are 5 forms of illusion, but it starts with I want to enjoy. And Maya captures. So that is what we need to change in Krishna consciousness, is our desire. Instead of the desire to enjoy, understanding, Bhaktaram Chakatapasam Sarvalokamashvam Surudam Sarvabhutam Ghatvamam Santim Richati. Everything belongs to Krishna and is therefore for his enjoyment. And based on this knowledge, we start to serve Krishna. That's serving, giving pleasure to Krishna. And forget about this desire to enjoy. So, but to attain that point, it is stressed here. We must be disgusted with material enjoyment and willing to surrender to the Lord. And then He's willing to free us from entanglement. So everything we do in this world under the modes of nature, impelled by our desire to enjoy, is sinful. And that is explained here in the second paragraph. Can someone read that second paragraph of the purport, please?
Yes, my Lord.
Thank you.
By the grace of the Lord, one is allowed to enjoy this material world, but when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, and when one sincerely surrenders into the lotus feet of the Lord, then the Lord is so kind that he frees one from entanglement. Krishna says, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, first of all, surrender, and then I will take charge of you and free you all from all reactions of sinful activities. Sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of one's relationship with the Lord. In this material world, activities for material enjoyment which are considered to be pious are also sinful. For example, one sometimes gives in charity to a needy person with a view to getting back the money 4 times increased. Giving with the purpose of gaining something is called charity in the mode of passion. Everything done here is done in the mode of material nature, and therefore all activities but service to the Lord are sinful. Because of sinful activities, we have become attracted by illusion of material attachment, and we think, I am this body. I think of the body as myself and of bodily possessions as mine. Devahuti requested Lord Kapila to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. Thank you.
So, thank you. So you have different points for us here. The first point is that I must understand the cause of my problems, that it's my desire to enjoy. And one must understand that one is in difficulty. What is desire to enjoy? I'm suffering and going to hell. And one wants to change his situation. The third step. So we must go to these 3 steps. Understanding what I did in the past is wrong, trying to exploit others for my sense gratification, trying to exploit this world, and the second point is, yes, I'm fed up with it. I don't want it anymore, Krishna. And then the third point is, yes, I want to be instructed. Help me out of it. And then one becomes a disciple of a spiritual master. So that is basis here of Sankhya. Seeing the reality, what's going on in goodness. 11. Tam svagataham sharanam sharanyam svabritya samsara tarokuharam shikhna sayam prakite purusasya nana mesa dharma vidam varishtam. Someone read the translation, please.
Devahuti continued, I have taken shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of material existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists. And I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman and between spirit and matter.
Thank you. So, Sankhya deals with Prakriti and Purush. That, yes. And it is important to recognize that by these material desires, the Purush, the soul, becomes attracted to Prakriti. That, so that's Sankhya. And Prakriti Purush, we heard also in the Jnana section of Bhagavad Gita from verse chapter 13 till 17, it's all Jnana. In 13, Prakriti and Purush is discussed. And the Purush here mentioned is not a living entity. It's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And anyone who imitates this Purush, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the enjoyer, he is in trouble. So in this material world, material nature is being exploited by the small Purushas, or the living entities. That Srila Prabhupada writes the intricacies in the material world of the relationship of Prakriti and Purush, or the enjoyed and the enjoyer, is called samsara, or material entanglement. And that's the cause of our material entanglement. We try to exploit the material world. That's why we are in this samsara, that punkte pragati jan gunan, we are trying to exploit, to enjoy material nature. But Devahuti, he wants to cut the tree of material entanglement, and she found a weapon to cut the tree in Kapila Muni. That in the Bhagavad Gita 15 chapter verse 1, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and it branches down, and whose leaf are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So that is this tree. She wants to get out of this tree. So in this material world, so-called man and so-called woman are imitating the real Purush, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the actual enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we are all Prakriti, to be enjoyed. So in Bhagavad Gita, matter is analyzed as apara, inferior nature. And the higher, the superior energy, are the living entities. So the living entities are also Prakriti, but they are also trying to take the position of enjoyers. They are also Prakriti because they are also energy of the Lord. And so that's the cause of our samsara bandha, or conditioned life. And that's the problem to be solved. So the Lord is saranyam, which means the only worthy personality to whom one can fully surrender, because he is full in all opulences. So Srila Prabhupada mentions Saddharma Vidam Varishtam. So the best occupation is our eternal service to the Supreme Lord. And then in the purport it speaks about Dharma. Dharma is what we cannot give up. It's our nature. Like the nature of water is in its normal condition, it's wet. The nature of sugar, it should be sweet. If sugar is not sweet, it's not sugar. So the nature of the living entity is to serve the Supreme Lord. That is their dharma. And that service we cannot give up. Therefore, in the material world, everyone is serving. But is serving their own lusty desires. And that's the problem. So when we have fire, there must be heat. That cannot be given up. That's our saddharma, our occupation, eternal occupation. The eternal occupation is engagement in transcendental service of the Lord. Savaipum saparo dharmo yato bhaktiradokshya ahait kapatiyata yatma suprasudati. So Kapila Dev's Sankhya philosophy propagates pure, uncontaminated devotional service. That's the purpose of the Sankhya. Pure, uncontaminated devotional service. That text 12. Now Maitreya speaks again. Maitreya vacha itisvamatu niravatyam ipsitam nisanyapum samapavargavartanam diyabhinantyatmavatam satam katir babasa isat smitasobitanana. Can someone read the translation, please?
Maitreya said, after hearing of his mother's uncontaminated desire for transcendental realization, the Lord thanked her within himself for her questions, and thus, his face smiling, he explained the path of the transcendentalists who are interested in self realization.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So we have Supreme Lord will start now to speak. So unless one is interested in understanding his spiritual life or his constitutional position, his spiritual svadharma, and unless he also feels inconvenience in material existence, his form of life is spoiled. So you have these 2 points. We see also in Srila Prabhupada's preaching, in the Bhagavatam, you have always these 2 aspects. That at one time we have to hear that entanglement in material life causes suffering, it is futile, and so on. And at the other side, we hear about spiritual activities, purification of the heart and spiritual activities. So, to be a good candidate to make spiritual advancement, so one must feel inconvenience in one's material existence, and understanding that the solution is to take the spiritual life. If that doesn't come up, then one's human form of life is spoiled. And that's a problem, because people are in a mode of passion and ignorance, and they don't want to hear this philosophy. They think life is good, everything is good for the moment. They cannot come out of it. And therefore Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad Gita, one should not preach to those who are not tapasvis, who are not doing a little austerity, and who are not want to become my devotee. But a devotee wants to be more merciful than the Lord, and still wants to attract them. And that's the characteristic of a devotee. He cannot see the suffering of others. So one who does not care for these transcendental necessities of life and engages like an animal in eating, sleeping, and mating has spoiled his life. Questions asked out of the desire for liberation from conditioned life of material existence are called apavarga vardhanam. Those who have factual spiritual interest are called sat, or devotees. Asat, a platform which will not exist. That's what it means, asat. It's temporary. One can understand someone gives you $1 million for 1 second and it's past. You understand, yes, it's useless. But if it's a little longer, we think still we can enjoy. but it's all going very quick. So it's all an illusion, factually. Asat, means it does not really exist, because soon it's over. That's so. But if we come to our spiritual consciousness, our pure consciousness, then we will exist eternally. That our consciousness will not be interrupted when we leave this body. So our spiritual soul, everything existed eternally, but the Assad has accepted the material world as his shelter. And therefore, we are full of anxiety that because we accepted this sense gratification as our happiness, we try to become happy in this world when it doesn't work out. Because it's all Assad Khan. It's an incompatible situation, an eternal soul in a temporary situation. That and the spirit soul, by this false ego, got attracted to the false idea that I'm going to be happy when I enjoy matter, but that tendency to enjoy, that's our problem. Actually, the spirit soul is not as sad. As soon as one is conscious of these facts and takes to Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada, we become sad. And therefore, Lord Kapila will speak about the satam, the pure devotees, those who are attracted to the sat. So, satam gati, that's the path of the eternal. And what is this liberation? We heard this in this pure consciousness. Bhagavad Gita, I think. So, in 5.5 of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada, this is the verse, Lord Krishna's verse, Yat Sankhya Prapyate Stanam Tat Gyurgyarapkam Yate Ekasam Sayoga Sayapasa Sapashati. One who knows that the position reached by analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. The purpose of Srila Prabhupada is the ultimate goal is self-realization. There is no difference between the conclusions reached by the two processes. So one process describes how to become detached from matter, and the other explains how to become attached to Krishna. But attachment to Krishna means that one becomes automatically detached from matter. And that we will hear here. That we have still 2 verses to go, but we will now have a break of 10 minutes. The time now is 18:40, so it's 18:50, so 6:50 p.m. In 10 minutes we resume, and then we will finish the last 2 verses and then have a discussion. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, so we will continue. So here, finally, we have Lord Kapila Dev who starts speaking. That Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yoga Adhyatmika pumsam matto nishyasyasayami atyanto paratiriyatra dukasya sa sukasya cha. Can someone read the translation, please?
The personality of Godhead answered, the yoga system, which relates to the Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
So in the material world we cannot have unadulterated happiness. So any kind of happiness, there is also distress, it's contaminated. It's like we want to drink milk. Srila Prabhupada says, milk is very nice, but if you want to drink milk, you need a cow and you need to maintain a cow and keep the cow fit to supply milk. So the yoga system, what Kapila Dev said, is meant for ending all material happiness and all material distress, both. So in the best yoga system is Bhakti Yoga, as taught in Bhagavad Gita. So, of course, it's also in Bhagavad Gita, Matra Spast Kantya Situsna Sukadukadaha Mapin Nitya Stixus Vabharata. One must be tolerant, tolerate the heat in the summer, cold in the winter. So one must tolerate happiness and distress when they come and go. That's from our sense perception. And Yamina Vyatanti Purusham Purushakshaba Samdak Susukam Dram Somitat Verkalpa. And one who can tolerate such happiness and distress is ready for liberation. Of course, this happiness and distress, when there is happiness, there is distress. Isam Sosiabra Durkirania Evtatiant Vantikantianat Shramati Buddha. Bhagavad Gita 5.22. One who enjoys material happiness, distress will follow. It's a material law. But the yoga system is the science of the spirit. One who practices yoga, why? To attain the spiritual platform. And on the spiritual platform, there is no question of material happiness and distress. It's transcendental. So Lord Kapila will eventually explain how it is transcendental. Tammimam te bhavakshami yam avocham puranage krishnam shrotukamanam yogam savanganaipanam. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formally to great sages, and it is serviceable and practical in every way. So when we have a super excellent process already, which is present in the Vedic scriptures, there is no need to concoct a new system. It will just mislead the innocent people. And that is the essence of Srila Prabhupada's purport. So that is the section for today. Now we have time for discussion. So we heard in this section a lot of instructions, advice for making spiritual advancement. So, which instructions do you remember and which are most relevant, you think?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Kanta.
Um, what I remember the best and what struck me, in a sense, is it was the verse number 7, where Devahuti says that she is sick of her material attachments, and Srila Prabhupada in purport writes that unless one is really tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. I immediately thought about myself. If I'm really sick of my material attachments, I think that not yet. Although of some of them I do.
Yeah.
But of some, really, in some cases, I try to enjoy and hope that I will be happy.
Yeah. That's a very honest answer. I think we are most in that case that we hear from the Bhagavatam, yes, we have to give up the enjoyment, but still, when enjoyment is there, we are reluctant to give it up completely. Of course, we cannot give it up completely because we must eat and so on, but we must restrict it. And at least if we hear the Bhagavatam, theoretically we understand it's a cause of our misery, this attachment. And as we become purified, we will get that point. But it takes a while, that's true. It's not so simple, just so I hear the Bhagavatam for 5 days and I get rid of it. It takes longer. Any other points, please? Thank you, Moderator.
I can ask a little bit on this point.
Yes, sure.
Am I right to think that only Krishna can remove these unnecessary desires?
This only Krishna can purify your heart. That is correct. That because the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam, he gives realization from within the heart. But it's a cooperation between the spiritual master and Krishna. If we please the spiritual master, Krishna will remove this. So there is that cooperation always. And that's something we should never forget. But yes, the change of our desires, finally it's our free will. But the material energy is so strong that without the help of Krishna, we cannot get out of it. Therefore, Krishna says, you surrender to me. That's the meaning of surrender. We start to practice devotional service, external activity at least, and then the internal will follow. If the heart becomes purified, we will start to feel love and devotion for Krishna. But in the beginning, it's more service than devotion. But by the mercy of Krishna, but the point is also param dristvani vartate. One must get a higher taste. And the higher taste you get from hearing the Bhagavatam and serving the spiritual master at the same time. That we learned already in the 2nd chapter in the 1st canto. Susru susha dadanasya vastev katavachi syanmatse vyavika punya tirtali shevanat. When you hear the Bhagavatam with great faith and attention and serve the Mahatma, the spiritual master, then you get taste, Krishna says. Then you get taste. So that is also Nastvaya Bhatri Sunnityam Bhagavata Sevya, Bhagavata Tamaske Bhaktivaibhava Naisiki. By hearing the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, both, the heart starts to become purified. So yes, that is what happens. Does that help? Thank you. And the other point, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So the point that I liked quite a lot is that the seeds of our distress are sown in happiness. So the act of chasing happiness is in a way a cause of our distress. So that is something which is like, I mean, all our life is spent about chasing happiness, right? But basically, such is the arrangement of material world that there is no perfect happiness. So within happiness, distress is there. So that was something very insightful.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Prahlad Maharaj said, from the moment you try to become happy in this world, your unhappiness starts. And when from the moment you stop that, your real happiness starts. And that's what's mentioned here in this section. Thank you, Shyam Kishore. Any other sharing or comments or questions?
Maharaj, in the first verse, Prabhupada in the purport says, in the mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. On the passion, on the platform of passion, there is no knowledge. So ignorance, of course, there is no enjoyment, no knowledge. So that's kind of very interesting. The passion platform, which everybody is in. I myself in mode of passion platform. There is no knowledge.
No.
To get some knowledge, I got to transcend out of this passion and come to goodness. Brahma, the transcendental platform is far higher. Just first come to platform of goodness, even get knowledge.
Yeah. That at least goodness is required to understand the knowledge. That like Dhritarashtra was in passion, and Akrura gave him good knowledge. He said, "Yeah, don't give the Pandavas their share of the heritage. It's their legal right." And so on, and so many things Akrura said to Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra said, yes, you give very good advice. It's like hearing the nectar of the gods. But unfortunately, it cannot stay in my heart. It goes to it like a lightning. So that is the point, it's going to it like a lightning. That it's because due to attachment and aversion in this world, we cannot fix our mind on spiritual knowledge. It's not possible. It's too disturbed. And we can hear it and we can make something of it and think we understand. But if we understand it, then we will act properly. And that's only in the mode of goodness. So yes, that's good point. It is therefore we read Bhagavad Gita and we become a little purified but still in passion, and then next time we read a little more purified. It's like it's something different we read. We get more realization and gradually, therefore it looks like this is unlimited Bhagavad Gita in understanding, and it's true that but we factually really understand it when we are self-realized on the transcendental platform or on the mode of goodness. We understand how the factual situation and how to practice it, but it's not Vijnana. Vijnana comes when we go to the transcendental platform. But goodness is the best mode. We should all try to live in the mode of goodness. Thank you, Chapel.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Any other points to share?
There's a similar point in relationship to Kunti Devi's prayer.
that your lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. So, like devotee is saying, she's exhausted, she's tired with sense enjoyment. So he says, Janmaishwarya Sutta Shibire Damana Madho Puman, that verse, and he says, Niskinchana Gochara.
Yeah.
So it's kind of same thing, more or less.
Yeah. Janma, Aishvarya, Shuddha, Shibir. These are 4 factors which gives us impersonal ignorance, attachment and aversion. We are attached to our birth, aristocratic birth, to our opulence, our possessions, to our diplomas, to our education, to our knowledge, and to beauty, which is all temporary in this world. And by that attachment, one cannot pray feelingly to Krishna. The same thing, there's no feeling for Krishna. There's feeling for things in this world, but not out of this world. And that's these transcendental emotions, this Bhaktiras, that's what the soul wants. But if we remain attached to this world, we cannot get it. Good point. Thank you, Advaita Krishna. Good.
Maharaj, there is one more point. In verse number 10, Prabhupada says, sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And then he says even pious activities are sinful.
Yeah.
If it's for material enjoyment, they're sinful.
Yeah, because it's pious activities is according to the karma kanda. One acts piously and then gets later, next life, greater enjoyment. But the tendency to enjoy is there. And pious activities or impious activities, both they cause rebirth. And taking birth again is suffering. So it's all, pious activities are also based on the idea that I'm the enjoyer. So, and that's the cause of sinful activities. That we call it pious, and that we say, oh, I'm from a pious family, but it means, we are also sinful. That's what they are saying. Because pious means, trying to enjoy according to the scriptures. But it's also a material activity. A good point that because that's just the many, they don't want to worship Krishna because Krishna takes their pious activities and their impious results, both it takes away. And they are not against taking the impious away, but not the pious. So worships of Lord Shiva, they go into the temple of Vishnu and usually they don't go, but when they go into the temple, they keep their money safe. But they are careful that because this Krishna will give me trouble in this material world. But Krishna gives the entire solution that get rid of everything, pious and impious. Yeah, that's sure. That's because if you are attached to this karma kanda, that's the same thing. You will not be able to take to that process. We have also understand that this is an obstruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
I want to ask something. So I just want to get like a bird's eye view of Shankhya philosophy. So broadly, of course, I've not read this canto, so I'm just going by whatever I've read so far. So broadly, like what Devahuti is asking is like a more simple pragmatic thing, like how do I get rid of distress or problems, like she's feeling this distress, uh, and how do I get rid of this distress or become happy. So broadly, like Shankhya is more like like talking about like things rather than talking about bhakti per se. It's more talking about it from a pragmatic level, or more focused towards the benefits of bhakti rather than bhakti itself. Is that a good bird's eye view of Shankhya, or
Not really. Sankhya analytically explains what is your identity and what's your spiritual activity. And to understand that, we will hear, you must take shelter of Krishna's pure devotees and hear from them Krishna's pastimes. When you hear Krishna's pastimes, then you will become purified in heart gradually. And as that purification takes place, you will develop love for Krishna and love for Krishna and engage in all forms of devotional service. And Kapila Dev will speak about deity worship as one of the ways to make spiritual advancement, and how this and what this deity worship is. He will analyze it. He says Krishna is in everyone's heart. Deity, what's the purpose of deity worship? You worship the deity on the altar, you do puja, but while doing the worship, you must transfer the deity to your heart and feel the deity in your heart at the same time. At the same time. That's the purpose of deity worship. Very analytically will explain that how to realize Krishna is all pervading by feeling him in your heart at the same time as on the altar. So transferring the deity into your heart and feel the deity in your heart while doing the deity worship. So we will hear that in the next sections, 2 sections, tomorrow and the day after. We will hear the essence of Sankhya. Sankhya means understanding the dharma of the eternal activity of the spirit soul and engage in that activity.
So the other thing that I things that would be of interest, and maybe not in today's class, in subsequent classes, like chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita in most of the traditional commentaries is titled as Shankhya Yoga. The Prabhupada calls it like contents of the Gita summarized, but in the many of the traditional commentaries, it's mentioned as Shankhya Yoga. So I'm also like personally interested in knowing how what is being said here by Kapil Muni, how it Lord Kapil is also like like how it fits broadly with what Lord Krishna says in chapter 2.
Yeah, but in chapter 2 at the end, only a glimpse of bhakti is given. And the whole chapter 2 is not about Sankhya Yoga, but big parts are about Sankhya Yoga. It analyzes the situation of the soul, how it's different from matter. That is the beginning. But then it speaks about activities. Activities without personal interest. Dat karmanivatakarasti, Mahaphalesha, Nakarjuna. And then Krishna, so you do your duty, but you are not entitled to the result of your activities. And you should not be attached to not doing your duty. That But that's the lowest form of karma yoga. That yoga, Krishna says, is equal then in happiness and distress. Equal in happiness and distress. But that's the lowest form. But then further, Krishna explains it in the third chapter further and develops it later. But it's not completely developed in the second chapter. It comes to that point practically. But that's not a complete Sankhya Yoga. That's the introduction. Then after that, you must learn to act as a spirit soul. And the first level of acting as a spirit soul is acting without being attached to the fruits. But then a higher level, Krishna says, Shakhnarta karma noyata lokayam karma bandhana. You do the activity, you act as a spirit soul by doing it for my pleasure. Otherwise it's sinful. And then higher, Krishna will say, Yat karos yatasyas yat yos tadasyat. Whatever you do it as a sacrifice for me, as an offering. But then patram pushpam phalam toyam. Then internally you must do it with love, a higher level. So we go to the external activity, and then the internal fits in gradually. The higher consciousness of doing it for Krishna, doing it out of duty, doing the activity for Krishna, doing it out of duty, then doing it out of duty, give the result to Krishna, higher, and more higher, you do the activity itself for Krishna, and you give also the result to Krishna. Then higher is, you do it, the activity with devotion for God, for Krishna, and offer the result to him. And then it becomes bhakti. So that development is in the chapters afterwards. But the beginning you find in the second chapter. But the atheistic Kapila, he focuses on the beginning and the attainment of Brahman by this karma yoga, karma vatakaristi. And that's, according to them, that's the end. But it's not the end. It's the beginning. So that's the difference. And traditional commentaries means mostly wrong commentaries. We must understand that. Prabhupada's commentaries, they are the commentaries as it is. These traditional commentaries are mostly impersonal and so on and so on. So many varieties and speculations. But on Bhagavad Gita we should not speculate. This is Prabhupada had direct contact with Krishna. And he told him everything. And we got it to the disciplic succession. So that's the difference. Does that help, Shyam Kishore?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay. It was a very nice comment. Thank you.
Maharaj, if you
Yes,
allow
sure.
me, I have a question. Just like what we discussed about even past activities, which we plan to have a better life, even karma kanda, or in any way trying to enjoy our senses, eventually will turn out to give us, like be equal to sinful activities. Can you help me reconcile when we see the narrations of Kardama Muni and Devahuti enjoying for hundreds of years sense enjoyment, which is Lamentations of Devahuti in chapter 23, and Kardama Muni went on after that, and the detailed explanations of all the enjoyment also there. So how do we reconcile that as being not sinful activities as per what we discussed just now?
Kardama Muni wanted to fulfill the desires of Mother Devotee. It was a very, very high yogic platform. He had no material desires. But he wanted to facilitate her And yes, they went on sightseeing in their flying mansion all over the universe. But Kapila Muna was on a different level. Its consciousness was different. He was a liberated person, and he remained every moment a liberated person. But devotee was not on that level. She was also yogic, quite advanced, because she was advanced because we can see as she speaks now, she understands I'm in trouble. And that's a good qualification. And that's a point made here. We must understand that we are in trouble. And the material energy is so powerful because Maya tells you everything is all right. But she was not in Maya. She understood I'm in trouble and I want to get out of it. So she was quite advanced. So that's the difference between Kardama and devotee, different levels of advancement. But both were quite advanced. Devotee was nearly liberated, but she went to the pastime.
So we could include that in the category of pastimes of liberated souls, but not conditioned souls enjoying sense enjoyment.
Well, certainly Kardama Muni, Mother Devauti, she was also not ordinary. Srila Prabhupada has written that before. No ordinary soul. The Lord does not become the soul. The son of does not appear as a son as an ordinary soul. So she is not an ordinary soul. Like Arjuna was also not an ordinary soul. But she was not on the level of Kadamba Muni. That's explained also in previous chapters. She had a yogic level, but not that of her husband. She was as good as a liberated person. But anyway, we see here the Kardama Muni left to follow the Vedic principles. And Mother Devotee remained at home, following the Vedic principles, being instructed by her son for our benefit. It's really for our benefit. It's like Queen Kunti. You refer to Queen Kunti and her prayers. Our Acharya says about Queen Kunti that she was on the level of because you have prema. She was on the level of prema, but you have 7 levels of prema. I don't know if I remember them, but it's pranaya, mana, pralaya, raga, anuraga, bhava, and then mahabhav. But this bhav is a stage of prema. And our Acharya said Queen Kunti was on the level of anurag, great attachment to the Supreme Lord. She was already at prema. But she's speaking as a conditioned soul. And just to instruct us. So this is, yes, that's wonderful. In the Bhagavatam we have so many great devotees and who are playing a role just to instruct us. Does that help, Advaita Krishna?
Yes, that really helps a lot, Maharaj. Yeah, thank you. There was a lot of confusion in my mind about that.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Good. Now time is over. We will see tomorrow for the second part. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.